thank you for joining us, firstly. And, okay,
thank you very much.
I'll get straight to the point. The first reaction when anybody hears of you and the film that you made is, okay, 87 patents. As an engineering student, that's the first thing, 87 patents, that's intimidating. You're uber successful and then you suddenly decide to give up, or rather, not give up, but invest all your money.
Yes.
Which you have accumulated across over the years. And you invested it into what you call a passion project.
Yes.
How did that come to happen?
Well, boy, that's a difficult question. One thing I have always learned in my life is that if you believe in something, you go for it 100%. You give your 300%. That's the only way to make something happen. So, when the idea of the film came, truth be told, IIT Kharagpur is the days which kind of glued me towards all the fine arts, performing arts and all that. Right? This was, still people remember me playing some roles in theatres and all that here. And that carried on even later on when I was in Columbia University and various other places. So, concept of performing arts, concept of theatre, concept of storytelling visually, making films, has been in my consciousness for a very long time.
Okay.
You can almost say that because of all this invention, I got sidetracked.
Okay.
So maybe
that's not a very, that was a very prominent sidetrack.
Yes. Well, to be honest, that's kind of what happened, because when I was in Columbia University, I was having the time of my life.
Manhattan.
We were, it's Manhattan. It's a fantastic place. And by the way, Manhattan very much reminds you of like Bombay or Calcutta. It has that kind of and it has tremendous amount of energy. And very exciting times. I was more interested in writing plays, putting it up, or political activism and this and that. The Gulf War was happening, all kinds of fights within student groups and everything, organizing stuff, as you guys are doing. And I should actually pause and say, what a fantastic job Kshitij has done, and all of you. I was very, very impressed with the skills of youngsters. You guys are kids. You guys are kids, and you have put together something that's quite mind-boggling, quite mind-blowing. I'm very, very, very happy that something like this is happening in IIT Kharagpur, and I'm very proud that IIT KGP has pulled this off. The students of IIT KGP has pulled this off. So coming back to it, so this organizing, this putting things together, plays, theatres, storytelling has been very much a part of my life, and I think in many ways, with the invention and everything that followed, the Americans are very, very cunning people. You know what they do?
We have you on that.
They give you responsibility. You see, once I was a fresh out graduate, right? I just finished my PhD, and all of a sudden I'm given this responsibility to pull together a team of 20 people, half of them PhDs, older than me and all that. And I was hooked. Who doesn't want this kind of a challenge? And that's it. I was, as a student, who was always being truant, making sure that I never attend anything. Here I was given responsibility, and that's it. I was hooked. And for next 10, 15 years, I was completely a nerd. Sleeping in my... Worse than that, actually, what had happened is that somebody told me that by the time you're 40 or 45 years old, you should settle down in your career. And just about that time, I was reminded that I was headed for a very sort of single track, kind of the traditional way of doing things. Perhaps becoming the division scientist, the chief scientist, and which is all great, but it's also boring. It's not fulfilling everything that I can do. It's not fulfilling my potential. And that's where I decided, well, it's now or never. If if I don't leave now, and I decided to quit NASA when I was 45 years old. And it was very, very, very simple that if I didn't leave at that point, I would be stuck. I would be stuck in becoming a chief scientist or God knows what. And I wanted to live my dream. And when you want to live your dream, everything else becomes secondary. So what had happened in this case is that I had the money. So I was moving around with this film, this story idea. People loved the film, loved the script, and that's why a lot. It's a fantastic cast and crew that I have came together because of the script. Money-wise, we were going to get the money. Then things happened. 2008 recession happened. Then the other big film, they got the wind of it. They started making this film. So nobody was going to fund me. And right at that time, the patent money came through. So what had happened is that none of the big companies were paying us any royalty. So whether you're talking about Sony or Samsung or none of these companies. And Caltech had sued them. And the court case went on for a while, and then they settled outside the court. And once they settled outside the court, of course Caltech got a whole bunch of money. Lawyers took a big chunk of that, and Caltech kept most of it, but we as inventors, we did get a certain percentage. And of course there are multiple inventors, so so that got divvied up accordingly. And whatever I got in my hand was enough to make this film, and I put all my money into it. And as I am very fond of saying, there is a very thin line between bravery and foolishness. And the jury is, I think, still out whether it was a brave job or a foolish job. But here it is. The film is here in front of you. If you love something, you always find time for it. And as you all know, academics is way overrated, right? So I think yes, finding time always becomes a very, very, very big issue. I would say I think one of the biggest distractions you have today is the internet and your laptop. You just see how much time you actually waste on that. I think one of the big problems I have faced is that I'm interested in so many different things, not just performing arts, but in philosophy, in politics, in science. I mean, much beyond what I was doing. Understanding quantum mechanics. There are some very key things that I want to study. Reading up on that, figuring out what's going on in the sphere of physics today. I mean, there's some absolutely fascinating developments that have happened in 20th century and continue to happen in the 21st century. In cosmology and astrophysics.
Columbia would have been a perfect place
for that. So, I have all these interests. How do I stop at a given point? Okay, I mean, it's very often that I have to say, okay, I would give understanding dark energy today 2 hours and no more. You really have to figure out, when you say things are extracurricular activities, they are not. You have to give it just as much time as you are studying for an exam. And once you put it on that same par, then you take up your extracurricular activities in a very, very structured and a very, very serious way. You actually give it just the same kind of, you schedule it in very much the same way you would schedule it. So you have to do that. And that's how you find your time. We are all I mean, I think just by virtue of the fact that we're in IIT and so on, we're all smart people. We can get things happen, make things happen. The main thing is to schedule it in. Don't think that just because it's extracurricular activity, that somehow it's going to happen. It has to be given the same kind of importance as, say, studying for exam. Professor is not going to see this now.
No, sir.
Yes, sir. We hope that they see this. they might, ease us.
Well, professors are doing great actually. That's another thing that this is life. Everybody will push you, and you have to figure out ways of pushing them back. That is a very good question. I have to say, in our days we did not have internet, and we did not have most of the facilities that you have now, and I'm very, very happy to see that. In IIT of 1980s was, and as it still is, a premier institution, but we had pretty much nothing to do beyond whatever studies we had to do, but spend that time doing, if you're good in sports, then sports, or if you're good in performing arts, doing performing arts. Now you have to realize that everybody realizes how much time internet takes up, right? How much time, when you have facilities, when you have a laptop, you'd rather be on the laptop than just be sitting and thinking. I think it allowed us a much bigger scope for interaction, for coming up with performing arts projects, putting them together, than say somebody sitting in Delhi can, because there is a lot of distraction in Delhi. There's a lot of distraction in Bombay. But IIT Kharagpur was, this is it, this is the universe. And I think that helped, or that sort of propelled this intense creative outburst that we had seen, because that's what we are putting together. The second thing I would say is that, of course, IIT was isolated, but it's very much, it's so close to Calcutta. And in our times also, I think a large number of people from Calcutta would come to Kharagpur. I don't know if that demographics has changed now. Probably has changed, because I think we live in an era of globalization. But I think we all brought together all the stuff that we had learned in Calcutta. For instance, I'll give you an example. Like one of the very well-known Bengal playwrights at that time, and kind of a rebel playwright, was Badal Sarkar. I don't know if you guys have heard about him. He was a very, very popular playwright within the sort of not the mainstream, but the more rebellious, more left kind of circles. And Badal Sarkar was sort of our guru.
Okay.
I think every single play of Badal Sarkar has been staged in IIT Kharagpur one way or the other. Right? So this is influence. I remember there was watching a film here, and the most ruckus crowd that would be there, making every kind of obscene and non-obscene gestures when a film is being played, was Patel Hall. Loved it. But then again, when say a film by Ingmar Bergman will play, or a film by Satyajit Ray will play, or a Ghatak's film will play, you see how quiet the audience will become, and how appreciative the audience will become. So we knew that we have our exterior, which is doing all this good for nothing stuff, but deep down there is an appreciation of art, there is an appreciation of good culture that was ingrained in us. And that's what IIT KGP gave me. So it allowed us to have this exclusive, space for us, and it allowed us to have access to all the cultural heritage that Bengal or Calcutta or whatever brought. And that's what made us. I knew Surya Sen and all that for ages. I could have just as well made a film on Binoy Badal Dinesh, for instance. But I think the reason I chose Surya Sen and the Chittagong story was two things. One is that this is the first time in 20th century a town was liberated from the British, and that something that big has to be marked, and that has not been given its due. Nobody knows about Surya Sen. Nobody knows that long before Gandhi and long before our independence, there was a town that became independent. So I think that was the impetus, if you will, of making the film. But the stories that you're talking about, that you relive, and more than the stories, actually it's creating the milieu of that time. And we took great pains to make sure that we capture it properly. Like, I'll give you a simple example. If you look at a wall today, you'll see the wall has a very sharp edge, it's a perpendicular edge, right? In those days, you did not have that. You have beveled edges. If you see my film, you'll see all edges are beveled.
That's detail.
That's detail. We want to make sure that the clothes they are wearing is very authentic. Now, how do you do it? And I had to actually study that. It's a very simple thing, but it took a while for us to figure it out. Like, I actually kept on looking at the poster of Kile Ham Ji Jaan Se and so on, saying, what is wrong? I mean, something doesn't look right. They were all wearing simple dhotis and kurtas, but it doesn't look right. And then we figured it out. See, the cotton in those days was a far coarse cotton than the cotton that's used today. And that fiber makes a difference, because your camera loves you, and camera is going to catch every single goddamn detail that's there. And so what happens is that as soon as you put today's cotton on somebody, you can never get the old feel. So we had to actually go to these handloom fairs and pick out old cotton and this khadi kind of cotton. But not quite khadi, because not everybody was wearing khadi at that time, but the coarse cotton, and make everybody's clothes from that. So it's these kinds of things that make the difference. Like I had done research, not me personally, but somebody else had done the research of seeing that what you call those fences, iron fences. What kind of style the iron fences wore. Today when you have fences, there is a special kind of links that they use. It's not the same kind of links that they used in 1930s. So we had to find that. And then of course, finding the location that will always remind you of that place was very important. And the last thing I did, of course, is that almost all actors were meant to roll on the ground before they took a shot. The clothes had to crumple, they had to be naturalized. In fact, all the clothes, after we got them, we actually, what you could call that, kind of boiled them in tea water, so that they get, it doesn't have the new clothes look. So there's a worn look. So these kinds of things we did. But one story that has really stayed in my mind, and I could not use it in the film. It was kind of there in the script, but then in the shooting stage, it kind of got left out. Was that these rebels or these revolutionaries used to hide? They were in hiding. So how did they eat? And very often they would get caught when they come out in the market and so on. So they would be fed by people in that village or in that area. And this is what the story was, that this person was telling me, and she was a young kid at that time. She said that you suddenly see from the window, the old windows have those bars, those vertical bars. From that, a hand comes in, and from inside the house, they'll just make like a ball of rice and dal and give it to that hand, and that hand takes it and goes away. That's how these guys were fed. I mean, this is kind of spooky, but this is the kind of level of protection that they would get from ordinary people, and this is the level of hiding that they have to do. Probably today in India, when there are a lot of people fighting against things that they don't like, they have to do the same thing, perhaps. But this is a very interesting story that I had heard. Netaji, for only one reason. Absolutely. You talk about movies, the first name that comes to your mind is Tarapada. I don't know if that concept is there anymore. Well, in Netaji, apparently there was a legend that there was a guy, who was a projectionist. His name was Tarapon. And we IITians, we are always, well, what should we say? We always are up to no good. Especially when a movie is playing. And especially if there is a scene that we particularly like, we would say, Tarapon, rewind. Alright, so that's the kind of the IIT urban legend. So having seen all the movies in Netaji, of course I would have loved to have shown the film in Netaji, but I'm so happy that there are some 1,400 people or 1,500 people, God knows how many there are watching the film here. And I totally wish we were an even better projection facility than what we have, but I think it's more important that people at least get to see the film rather than for that perfection. So I am excited. I'm nervous as well.